My friends, there are a couple of extremely important warning signs that can indicate that you're stuck on your guitar journey and that you immediately have to make some changes. So if one of these very important warning signs that we're about to discuss applies to you, it means that it doesn't matter how much you're practicing and how much time and effort you put into your practice routines, you probably won't make any progress at all, because there are some things you need to change when it comes to either your technical or theoretical approach. And once you start to implement those changes, your kind of stagnating progress curve will skyrocket again, and you will make faster progress than ever before without actually practicing more. So with this way of practicing, you will get results like that in no time. The reason why I want to make this specific video for you this week is because I was at Guitar Summit over the weekend, which is Europe's biggest guitar convention, and I shook hands and took photos with hundreds, possibly thousands of you over the last 4 days. Originally, I had some new exercises for you this week, but a lot of you talked about some personal frustrations and some fears when it comes to making progress on the instrument, and all those great and very important conversations inspired me to make today's video about these 7 very important signs. So let's start with sign number 1. This one is going to be all about technique because it concerns speed. So the first sign that your guitar progress might be kind of failing is you're stuck at a certain speed limit. So no matter how hard you're practicing, you simply can't play any faster. You work on your scales and exercises every single day, but for some reason it feels like you're permanently stuck at a certain BPM number, and that's super frustrating, right? So what holds back most guitar players from building speed is practicing like this. So practicing really slow with a big focus on perfection, so making sure that every single note is ringing out nicely, making sure that you're playing perfectly in time. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And once you can play an exercise at like, I don't know, 50 or 60 beats per minute, you just try to play a little bit faster every single day. But then you're stuck at a certain tempo, right? And it's impossible for you to speed it up beyond this tempo. A lot of you want to play stuff like this. And the absolute only way to get there, as you might know if you subscribe to this channel, is practicing way outside your comfort zone. You want to sound sloppy in your routine, you want to feel completely overwhelmed, and you want to struggle. I can't mention this often enough. So if you feel stuck with your tempo, push beyond your limits starting today. It's the only way of getting results just like this. And if you're looking for the best exercises to break out of your comfort zone, the best possible exercises for building speed quickly, I just released a brand new speed exercise package last week for all my awesome members in my Guitar Academy on Patreon. You can find the link down below, patreon.com/bernd. It's in the description and in the first comment. This brand new package features the best workouts for building speed, like speed burst exercises, and also some great practical workouts that are actually fun to practice and don't just sound like boring mechanical exercises. So if you're sick of being stuck at a certain tempo, just click the link down below, get started with this package right away, and I promise you will play faster than you ever thought possible in just 1 or 2 weeks of working on this. Now the second bad sign that's very important is you're feeling a little bit lost when you look on the neck. That can also really hold you back on your journey. Because if you can only see a couple of scale boxes here and there across the neck, like the super famous A minor pentatonic scale box from the 5th to the 8th fret, right? But you can't navigate fluidly all across the neck from the 1st to the 24th or maybe 22nd fret. You will never really sound musical when you're improvising or writing guitar solos, because you will always just repeat the same old boring patterns and riffs and licks. So guitar progress is not all about speed, technique, and all of those flashy, exciting things. You will also definitely be stuck on your journey if you don't learn how to navigate all across the neck. And if you can't see the notes across the fretboard, this will be a big crutch for the rest of your life, which you want to avoid. Especially because it's really simple. So the way that I learned all this is I just started out with the open E string, and I was just visualizing the white keys on the piano across the neck. So E, F on the 1st fret, G on the 3rd fret, A on the 5th fret, and so on. Once I could visualize all these notes up until the 12th fret, so E once again on the 12th fret, I was just filling in the blanks. So the note between F and G, for example, could either be F raise the semitone, so F sharp, or it could be G lower the semitone, so G flat, Those are enharmonically the same note. And then I simply started working in octaves. So instead of doing the same thing for the next strings, I was simply learning the octave interval. I was learning to visualize in octaves. So for example, if I know that I have A right here on the 5th fret on the low E string, and I know that the octave interval looks like this, I also know that I have A right here on the 7th fret on the D string, and if I think in an octave interval once again, I also know that I have A right here on the 10th fret on the B string. And I didn't even study those higher strings yet in the way that I studied the low E string. I was just working on note location exercises, thinking in octaves. So whenever I really memorized the note on the low E string, just visualizing that in octaves, finding it all across the neck. And those are some fast and easy tricks of unlocking the entire neck in just a couple of days of practicing. Now, if you need some help with that and you also want to visualize the most important scales and arpeggios in the fastest and easiest way possible, I also have a full course on fretboard visualization in my Guitar Academy on patreon.com/Bernd, which will take you from easy beginner exercises all the way to easily visualizing scales all across the neck without the boring process of memorizing scale boxes and all those patterns. You're instead working with the notes all across the neck like a real pro, which will make all the theory and fretboard visualization fall into place for you in just a matter of days. So if you still can see the notes on the neck and the most important scales and arpeggios, just do this course. It'll just take you a couple of days and the problem is solved forever. Now, the next problem and bad sign I'd like to talk about is feeling unsure about your guitar technique. I think this one concerns pretty much all self-taught players, me especially when I started out, because while I did have a couple of teachers here and there, nobody ever corrected my technique. So my first private teacher taught me how to play power chords, for example, or how to play the pentatonic scale. But he never taught me how to actually hold a guitar pick, how my thumb should be positioned behind my fingers, how the picking should actually feel like, if I should use my wrist for picking, if it's okay to push a little bit with my arm, if the thumb is allowed to stick out from behind the neck, if the hand is allowed to look like this, or if it always has to look like this, if my fingers should be curled when they hit the neck or flat. If no one ever explains those things to you as a self-taught guitar player, how in the world are you supposed to know about all this? So naturally, I developed a ton of bad habits. I was holding my pick weirdly, my fingers were just wildly flopping around when I was trying to play fast, which resulted in a lot of string noise and problems with my playing, until I discovered that I got much better results by closing my picking hand, for example, and holding the pick like this, like positioning it right here and then just closing my hand instead of going for the weird reverse angle that I always used before that, and that positioning my thumb behind the middle finger in the lower and middle registers across the neck actually helps a lot with stretching and with keeping my fingers, especially the pinky, very close to the neck. So my biggest tip is, if you're unsure about your guitar technique, you could either analyze your favorite players and try to look closely at the picking hand and fretting hand and compare that to how you are playing. I personally learned a lot by doing that, but of course by also making sure that what you're changing and adapting also fits your playing style and the music that you want to make. So for example, if you look at a really technical shred guitar player and you try to mimic the fretting hand position or the picking, but you actually want to play blues or jazz or anything like that, it might not be the absolute best choice. And of course, if you want a shortcut and you need some help and guidance with your guitar technique, I made multiple courses on that, like the alternate picking masterclass on Patreon. That will show you the details of actually building a super clean picking technique. So if you want my best tips and exercises, the biggest shortcut I can possibly give you, just go through this 30-day course on Patreon. I promise it will fix pretty much all of your bad habits that you developed over the years in just a couple of weeks of working on it. The next bad sign I would like to talk a little bit about is feeling unsatisfied with your live performances. So feeling really insecure about playing on stage and often being unhappy with how it turns out. I got inspired to talk about this not just because of the conversations at the Guitar Summit, but also by a recent post in the Personal Coaching Facebook group. That's a group where I'm personally coaching all the personal coaching members and platinum members of Patreon. Of course, I will keep it anonymous for the video. The post essentially says, I felt like I was really well prepared, but at the gig itself, I suddenly felt miserable. I was insecure, had to concentrate a lot and had poor lighting conditions. I tried not to let it show, but I was very unhappy with the cleanliness of my playing and my performance. How do you deal with that? So playing live is an incredibly important part of what we're doing as guitar players. And in my opinion, no matter how much of a professional musician you are, you won't ever be 100% satisfied because it never goes as planned. Even if you're playing perfectly, there are often some technical malfunctions. You might struggle with the gear, or as mentioned in the post, with lighting conditions, so you simply can't see what you're doing. Playing live is the ultimate test, but if you feel completely unsatisfied for many shows and over many years, there might be some things you have to adjust in your practice routine to get better results. The first thing that seems kind of obvious for a lot of people, but it isn't, is going for very close to almost similar conditions when you're preparing for a live show. So practice standing up. Definitely use the same sounds you're about to use on stage for the show. Also practice all of your pedal switches you're about to do on stage. Try to practice with the same monitoring setup at home. So if you're working with in-ear monitoring, use the exact same in-ears and try to work with a similar in-ear mix at home so that there are no bad surprises. And another great personal tip, try to really work on the challenging sections of the set. I feel like a lot of people make the mistake of just practicing the set over and over again in its entirety. But if there are a couple of songs in there that are quite easy for you to pull off live, I don't want you to neglect them. But if you have those really hard solos or even just a couple of measures that are really hard for you, it really helps to work on those like 1 hour before the show in a Cubase session or any DAW that you bring on a laptop, for example, and just loop those to play them over and over again. That doesn't just help with nailing them live from a technical standpoint, it also really helps psychologically because you feel like you did absolutely everything to prepare for this, right? And that's a great way of feeling super secure on stage, aside from building confidence by just doing this over and over again for many years. If you feel like you have similar issues and you need some deeper, more personal coaching, remember that there's a personal coaching tier on Patreon. That one you get access to my secret Facebook group, and I will personally help you out in situations like this to hopefully make playing live fun for you, aside from all the other technical and theoretical things we have to work on. Now the next bad sign I would like to talk about is having a steady practice routine, so practicing every single day or 5 days a week, for example, with a routine, and not seeing any progress. So I feel like a lot of guitar players build a practice routine once when they actually decide to work with a routine, and it consists of alternate picking exercises, maybe like this. Maybe legato exercises to work on the fretting hand. Maybe even some sweep picking stuff. But here's the thing, a lot of players just keep these same exercises in their routines for way too long. But if you're not challenging yourself by frequently switching those exercises in your routine, you will end up with a practice routine that kind of makes you feel nice because you're sounding pretty good while you're practicing it, but there will be no progress at all. You might just get marginally better at playing all of those exercises every single day. Maybe you can play them a little bit faster after a couple of months, but your overall playing will not get any better. Another bad sign is not developing any new music theory knowledge at all, although you've been playing for many years and you're actually practicing some theory concepts. So if you feel like you're not making any progress on your theory skills and on your understanding of music theory, although you're working on it, you might be working on it the wrong way. Because for most guitar players, music theory is something very abstract, something that you kind of study with books and you feel like you're in school again. When in reality, you can actually turn a lot of music theory topics, if not all of them, into fun exercises that make them very practical. If you're working on intervals, for example, you don't need to do that with a book. You can work on a really cool riff in a key, like with E minor. You could have a riff that starts out with the classic power chord, which is a perfect fifth. Then you could go to the minor sixth interval, maybe perfect fourth, minor third, or yeah, then down to the major second. So those are just a couple of different intervals I can find in the E minor scale by just playing the root note E and then different notes of the scale. Perfect fifth, minor sixth, minor third, major second. Ooh, and I forgot. Perfect fourth. So by working on intervals like this, being creative and having fun with it, I can actually also memorize the sound of them, which is very important. So not just the name, also the sound. So when someone plays something like this, I immediately know, okay, that's a minor sixth. I know that, I worked on that. Or with scales, for example, can be super fun to just switch out different notes in the scale and see what you end up with. So let's stick with the minor scale. Let's say you're working with A minor. So the notes A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, but you change the 6th note because you don't want that kind of classic dramatic minor sound. You want something a little bit warmer. You could play F sharp instead of F. So A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and then up to G. And that's actually just the A Dorian scale. So you get this sound in A Dorian instead of this more kind of sad, depressing sound. That's the Dorian vibe. And by working on the Dorian scale like this, I'm not studying a scale diagram, I'm not opening up a book or anything. I'm actually playing guitar, I'm having fun, I'm working on the different sounds and feelings connected with the intervals or scales. If you need some more help with that and a step-by-step program that actually takes you from the very fundamentals of theory to more exciting topics like the ones I just showed you, remember that I have full music theory courses for my Patreon members. You can find the link in the description or in the first comment. It's patreon.com/bernd. That's my online guitar academy. So if you never studied any theory and you still have a lot of blind spots with all that stuff, just start with one of those courses. It will help you with learning everything about theory that you need, so no fluff like overly complicated jazz stuff you might not ever need in your life. Those are the courses for you. Just click the link down below, get started today. And the last kind of bad sign I'd like to talk about is the feeling of really needing some guidance. So sometimes as guitar players we feel quite alone on our journey. We don't really have anyone to ask about bad guitar technique habits, and when we start out with all this we also can't really see them, so we don't even know that we're developing some bad habits with our picking technique or with our fretting hand technique. So for a lot of self-taught players it could be a great solution to actually get some lessons from someone that's better than you. I personally had a couple of people, especially at the conservatory where I actually studied music and guitar playing, that showed me some very important things that I would have never learned about. So if with everything that I told you in this video you still feel like you need a little bit of guidance, that's no problem at all. Maybe you can find a teacher in your area or just some fellow guitar players that you can talk to. It really helps. Even if you want my personal feedback, there's a solution. Remember, there's a personal coaching tier in my online guitar academy on Patreon. With that one you get access to the secret Facebook group where I'm actively engaging with students. I'm giving feedback on student videos, trying to help as much as I can with the picking technique, fretting hand technique, but also answering questions about music theory, about playing live, about absolutely everything guitar and music related. So if you enjoyed this video and you would like to become my actual student, just click the link down below, join my online guitar academy on patreon.com/bernd today. I will see you over there. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye bye.